Hello everyone, welcome to Inconvenient Truths by Jennifer Zeng. Recently, after the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP's head Xi Jinping gave an important instruction about stopping food waste. The CCP's state media has made a lot of fanfare about it. What does this mean? Also, why when more than half of China is suffering very bad flooding situations, why didn't Xi Jinping go to the affected areas to lead the disaster relief efforts, but went instead to northeast China to inspect the cornfields? Is it really because a food crisis is looming in China? Will China go back to a food rationing system like before? How was life under the rationing system? Also, as it seems that the CCP's mysterious annual Beidaihe Meeting has finished, what has happened at the meeting? Are the rumors about recent coups in Beijing and Shanghai real? Will Xi Jinping be ousted? Today, I will talk about all these issues. On August 11th, the CCP's mouthpiece Xinhua published an article titled "Xi Jinping Gives Key Instructions to Stop Food and Beverage Waste." In this article, Xi quoted a famous Chinese poem, "Who knows that of our meals in the dish, every grain comes after hard toil." He said that the amount of food that goes to waste in the country is shocking and distressing. We should still maintain a sense of crisis about food security. The impact of this year's COVID-19 pandemic has sounded the alarm. She also called for more efforts to strengthen legislation and supervision and establish a long-term mechanism that will resolutely stop food wasting. Immediately, a clean plate campaign was launched nationwide. Wuhan Catering Industry Association urged restaurants in the city to limit the number of dishes served to diners, implementing a system where groups must order one dish less than the number of diners. In other words, under the so-called N-1 system, a group of 10 people can only order 9 dishes. Following Wuhan's N-1 system, Liaoning province started to promote N-2, which means 10 people can only order dishes for 8. On August 14th, a restaurant in Changsha City in Hunan province started to ask diners to step on a weight scale and weigh themselves first before they can order their food. Universities throughout China all put up slogans such as "The food, hey, tastes so good. Saving food, hey, feels so wonderful. Empty your plates, don't be wasteful, boys and girls. The tiny rice grain is panting you, please don't waste me." Short videos and social media platforms said they will punish users seen to be wasting food in their broadcasts, cracking down on so-called big stomach kings. Prior to these events on July 24th, after being absent from the public eye for quite some time and amidst severe flooding situations in 27 provinces, Xi Jinping suddenly appeared in Jilin province and visited cornfields there. During this inspection, Xi Jinping said, "I care very much about grain production and food security," and he demanded that Jilin make efforts to ensure food security, accelerate the transformation of agricultural development, and provide more experience in developing modern agriculture. You know, in China, when the CCP and the CCP's propaganda machines start to stress on something or talk about how we must do well on this, it is always a sign that huge problems must have already existed in this area. Otherwise, they wouldn't have talked about it at all. As soon as Xi Jinping stressed food security and even mentioned about passing laws to punish food waste, people immediately viewed it as a sign that a food crisis must be looming in China. Is there hard evidence? On August 12th, China's State Administration of Grain and Materials Reserve officially reported that as of August 5th, wheat production in the main producing areas was about 43 million tons, a decrease of 9 million tons compared to last year. This report quickly sparked a lot of public discussion as worries about wheat and rice production reduction has been spread for quite a while now. I believe that this kind of figure is nothing surprising for people who have been following situations in China closely this year. So many natural and man-made disasters have happened in China. Actually, a friend of mine living in New York told me that this year in Jiangsu province, which is one of the most important grain-producing provinces, the summer wheat harvest was only 2/3 the average level. He knows this because his family runs a food business in Jiangsu. According to popular Chinese financial analyst Cai Jinping, in addition to the impact of epidemics on spring planting and hailstorms in the northeast and other regions, the northern drought is also serious. Wheat production in Henan, Shandong, and Anhui province generally reduced, some places by about 20 to 30%. This number is in line with what my friend told me. Cai Jinping also mentioned that in previous years, after harvesting wheat, farmers directly transported it to the flour mill to sell and store it there. But this year, most farmers stored wheat at their homes instead. In addition to wheat, the floods that are now spreading across China's 27 southeast provinces pose a huge threat to rice production, as the southeast is the main rice-producing area in China. This year's persistent floods and high water levels have wiped out the rice crops in many major rice-producing areas. Areas such as the Poyang Lake Basin and the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River, such as the Jinshan, Jianghan Plain, are likely to see a significant reduction of rice production this year. Apart from drought and floods, lotus swarms have also occurred in Yunnan, Guangxi, and Hunan province this year, coupled with disasters such as the food killer or meadow moths. China's food supply may have already hit the red line. This year's widespread reduction in grain production will surely happen. In Asian China, if there was a year of disaster, the government would open the granary and release the grain reserves. However, China's current grain reserves situation is very worrying. On July 12th this year, a woman released a video of her inspecting the granary of the China National Grain Reserve Group Corporation at Qingang County in Heilongjiang Province. As one can see in her video, all the corn grains in the granary are moldy. She said the corn smells terrible and can be crushed with a finger. She also says that 20 centimeters thick of sifted matter were mixed in the corn grains that were sold to her. After this video was released, the China National Grain Reserve Group Corporation refused to admit that there was a quality problem with the reserves. Instead, they issued a new regulation saying that in the future, nobody is allowed to go into the granary with a cell phone or other cameras. If you search with the word granary in Chinese on Chinese social media platforms, you can find a lot of videos showing granaries on fire, such as this one showing a granary in Shanghai on fire on December 13, 2019. This one is also in Shanghai on July 5th this year. This one is at Duyun City in Guizhou Province on July 1st this year. And this one is in Ningyuan County in Hunan Province in March this year. Why did all these granaries catch on fire? The theory is because there was no more grain or not enough grain inside them, so officials set them on fire to hide the problem. Therefore, even the food authorities may claim that China has this much grain reserve according to the numbers they gather from local food officials. Who knows how many of the granaries are actually empty or full of moldy grains? A relative of my friend in New York is a former CCP official in the food management system in Jiangsu province. This relative is now running his own grain company. 10 of his granaries are rented by local food authorities for official food grain reserves. He has 11 more granaries for his own company too. My friend said that he learned from this relative that the actual official grain reserves could only be half of what is reported. He also said that in previous years, his relative sold grains to Shenzhen to make more money, as food price in Shenzhen is higher. But this year, local authorities did not allow this relative to sell grain to Shenzhen anymore. Instead, they bought all grains reserved in 10 out of his 11 granaries. His relative only has 1 granary left for his own use. This indicates that local authorities are preparing for future food shortage. Another obvious sign is this. In previous years, after some grain was reserved for more than 2 years, the quality was no longer good because they were not taken good care of. This kind of old grain was usually sold to prisons for prisoners to eat or to animal food processing plants to be made into food for animals. However, this year they have stopped doing this, which means no more old grain was sold to make space for new grain. Everything has to be kept. The latest official news is on August 17th, the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences released a report and predicted that in the next 5 years, China could run short of 130 million tons of food. We all know that China is a net food importer. Every year, it imports over 1 trillion tons of food, and 80% of soybeans have to rely on imports. This year, with the pandemic affecting many countries, some countries have limited the export of food, and foreign currency reserve in China is also shrinking due to a variety of reasons. All these add additional challenges to China's food security. Another thing to take notice is, in recent years, the so-called supply and marketing cooperative system from the 1950s, 1960s, and 70s started to appear again in China. What is supply and marketing cooperative? It was the system adopted by the CCP before the so-called reform and openness to the outside world policy. Under this system, the government set the price for everything and bought and sold everything too. There were no private companies or free markets. According to Xinhua, 95% of small towns had resumed the supply and marketing cooperative in 2018. There were altogether over 30,000 such cooperatives in China. Accompanying this system in the 1960s and 1970s was the national rationing of virtually everything. I remember in my childhood, up until when I went to university in the 1980s, we had all sorts of vouchers for different things. Rice voucher to buy rice, flour voucher for flour, meat voucher, oil voucher, tofu voucher, sugar voucher, textile voucher, etc. Without a voucher, even if you had money, you couldn't buy those things. And how many of those things could we have? I remember each person could have 0.2 kilograms or about 0.4 pounds of pot and cooking oil per month. I have 2 younger sisters, so there were 5 people in our family. So for our entire family, each month we had only 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds of pork and cooking oil per month. That's why we seldom ate meat. Sometimes when we had sausages, each of us could have only 2 or 3 very thin slices, and those thin slices were put into our bowls. Inside our family, we also did rationing for everything. That was how difficult life was in my childhood. Even after I entered the university in 1948, we were still using food vouchers. I remember at that time there were often some small traders sneaking into female students' dormitories and yelling, "Food voucher for socks, food voucher for socks." That means we could exchange socks with food voucher if we had any extra. Will China go back to those days? Talks about China going back to planned economy have been going on for a while, with the international environment having changed dramatically for the CCP, and with the CCP faced with many challenges from all fronts. Nothing is impossible. As a matter of fact, many ordinary Chinese citizens have started to hold food ever since the pandemic happened. The problem is, as we can hardly get any real numbers from the CCP's official reports, it is very hard to estimate how bad the situation really is. We can only hope tragedy like the Great Chinese Famine, in which 40 million were starved to death, won't happen again. But hard times seem very, very likely for the Chinese people who live in the CCP's kingdom of lies, deceits, cover-ups, and brutality. In our episode on August 6 about CCP's split going public, I talk about the CCP's mysterious annual meeting at Beidaihe, in which the most important issues of the country are discussed and decided. And this Beidaihe meeting usually happens in late July to early August, but nobody knows the actual date as the CCP never announces it. This year, judging from the public appearance of the top CCP leaders, we have noticed that this year's Beidaihe meeting was longer than usual and has lasted for 2 weeks and has just finished. Why do I say so? Yesterday, which is August 17th, Xinhua reported that Xi Jinping had sent a letter to congratulate a conference of the National Youth Federation, and that Wang Huning, member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the CCP, attended the opening ceremony. Wang Huning is regarded as the chief advisor of Xi Jinping. On the same day, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang hosted a State Council executive meeting and talked about economic issues. As there are no photos or videos of this meeting, people assume that it was a virtual conference. Anyway, the fact that both Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang started having activities led people believe that the Beidaihe meeting has finally finished. Why was this year's Beidaihe meeting longer than usual? it was said that the internal fighting had been very intense, as many CCP seniors were very unhappy about Xi Jinping's handling of many things, including the trade war with the US and Hong Kong. According to exiled Chinese billionaire and whistleblower Miles Guo, or Guo Wengui, on August 13th, that was the date when the Beidaihe Meeting was still going on. There were 2 failed small-scale coups in Beijing and Shanghai, and that Xi Jinping was very much frightened because of those attempts. We have no idea how true this information is. From what we can see in Xinhua's report, Xi Jinping still has his 3 titles on when he emerged again from the Beidaihe Meeting. What are his 3 titles? General Secretary of the CCP, which means he controls the party, Chinese President, which means he controls the country, and Chairman of the Central Military Commission, which means he controls the army. However, from the fact that both he and Li Keqiang didn't personally or physically appear in the public events in Beijing, people think that they may not be staying in Beijing at all, especially for Xi Jinping. He might feel that it is not safe for him to stay in Beijing. Cai Xia, a former professor at CCP's elite Central Party school, who was just expelled from the party yesterday, which is August 17th, for openly criticizing Xi Jinping, said in an interview with Radio Free Asia that Xi Jinping is facing widespread opposition in his own party, and that getting rid of Xi Jinping has become a consensus within the party. However, Cai Xia said that it is very difficult to rely on the internal CCP force to replace Xi Jinping, as Xi had broken up the whole party and there was no space or atmosphere for normal exchange of views among party members. So it was impossible for other CCP members to organize themselves to do something together. By the way, Cai Xia also said that she felt honored to be expelled from the CCP, as she has no intention to associate with the CCP mafia, and is glad to be back in the ranks of common folks. Okay, that's all for today. Truth, no matter how inconvenient it is, does save lives. Please subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends and family, and check out my other videos. Thank you. See you next time.